Hey everyone, my name is Larry Tillman, and first of all, I want to say welcome to my video. What I'm going to be mentioning is common hate in America, acknowledging the elephant in the room. A brother in Christ and friend of mine, he sent me an email, and he thought that this would be a great topic of discussion. And so, uh, let me show you the email that he sent me. His name is Bruce. And he said, Larry, I read all of your Facebook posts with interest. All these things need honest discussion. D'Souza is an Indian Christian historian, and I think this interview adds some good points for discussion. God bless, Bruce. Well, Bruce, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for reading my post. What it shows me that someone is out there paying attention and not just listening to one side, because here in politics is always about one side. And the most common hate in America, and a lot of people may hate this topic, but I'm going to bring it up. Racism. Racism is not wanted in America. And a lot of people are afraid to talk about racism because they're afraid that someone may hate them for it. But you know what? I'm brave enough to go ahead and just say, I might as well bring it up because it is the elephant in the room. A lot of people may not want to discuss about it. A lot of people may want to push it in the back of their minds and just move on with their lives. But this is the fact. It is real. And it's still going on today. Now, it's been going on for hundreds of years, and it's still going to continue to go on, especially in America. We don't want it in our country anymore. So get over it for those who still hang on to racism. Now, here's some resources that I'm going to show you that I've gotten, from the internet. Now, I use a lot of discernment, and I made sure that these resources are very credible. And so you're going to see other reference points, other websites in this video as well. Now, tips for finding credible resources from the internet. Now, let me mention something this to you all. Now, if you're going to have a dialogue with me as far as this topic, feel free to dialogue. Your opinions are welcome. But let me tell you something. If you come to me with resources that is not credible, I'm going to disregard it as not credible. Because a lot of people have a tendency of using certain websites that they think is really credible. But let me show you some tips in finding credible websites. One, beware of hate sites. Don't trust them. All right. Let's say, for example, I'm going to use Westboro Independent Baptist Church. They're considered having a hate website. So I wouldn't use that type of website to say it's credible. And I'm just using for example. So, you got to make sure that you know what you're picking up. Second, Wikipedia cannot be trusted 100%. Reason being, because it can be alternated, which means it could be changed from time to time. Okay, so I wouldn't use Wikipedia as a credible source. If you want to use it for your own personal usage, that's fine. But please don't refer me to Wikipedia. I'm going to treat you just like all my college professors treated me in the past. If you come with me with Wikipedia, I'm going to not consider it as a credible resource. All right. Use discernment when using blogs or videos. Blogs or videos can be good, okay? But you got to use discernment whether that this is very credible or not. So you got to be careful when you're using blogs or videos. Don't just rely on Google search. When entering a subject in the search bar, type .edu, .gov or .org behind the topic you are searching. Let's say, for example, you want to know facts about whales. Okay, in the Google search bar, you can put whales.gov, and it will take you to a credible website. Okay, be careful when you're using .com. All right, because when you're using those .com websites, you want to make sure that they're credible, because anybody can use a .com website and say, well, this website is credible. Like I said, if you go to somewhere like Westboro Independent Baptist Church website and use that as a credible resource, 9 times out of 10, people are gonna disregard it. Everyone is not always right. All right, this right here sums it all. Everyone is not always right. I'm going to use Allen West for example. Now, Allen West has a website and um, Facebook page that he uses. Some of his stuff, you say, okay, it's legit, but a lot of his stuff, you be like, I don't know, it's not legit. You may want to question these things. You may want to use discernment when you're trying to present these as credible resources. Now, let me tell you something. I took the time to do my research and find credible resources for you all. Okay, so if you tell me, say for example, that you learned something in school, okay, I'm gonna ask you, where's your resources at? Are you gonna present to me credible resources? No, I just learned for school. You may have to look it up for yourself. You know what? I'm just gonna disregard that dialogue, and I'm just gonna ignore it. So if you can't come to me with credible resources, then guess what? I may just disregard it as credible, depending on what you say. Now, Dinesh D'Souza, excuse me for pronouncing A in this word, Dinesh D'Souza's view on racism and politics. Now, let me tell you something. When I saw his video for the first time, I said something's very strange about this video. So I had to play this video over and over and over. I think I've listened to this interview. It's Greg Corombos of Radio America. He interviewed Dinesh D'Souza. And and if you want to know where the original video link is, I have it posted right underneath here, so you can write it down, research it. If you want to look it up, then go ahead, feel free to look it up. I want to make sure that you have access to that video, what I'm talking about, all right? And I had to listen to this video over and over and over to make sure that I'm hearing things right. And as I'm listening to this video, I can find many things wrong with it. It's like I find brand new things wrong what D'Souza is saying. Now, without further ado, let me go ahead and play this video for you.
My guest at this time is best-selling author and documentary filmmaker Dinesh D'Souza. His latest book, which we profiled last week, is entitled The Big Lie, Exposing the Nazi Roots of the American Left. We've asked him to offer his insights into the violence in Charlottesville this past Saturday. And Dinesh, thanks very much for being with us.
My pleasure. Great to be on the show.
Well, when we spoke last week, you were mentioning how the Antifa activists of today are reminiscent of the black shirts or brown shirts of yesterday, and Mussolini's Italy with the black shirts and Hitler's brown shirts in Nazi Germany, since they resort to violence to suppress speech and so forth. On Saturday, Antifa activists tangled with white supremacists who, of course, were espousing the types of things the Third Reich promulgated back then. So who were the fascists here? Was it one or the other or both?
Well, first of all, clearly there's a fascist streak running between both sets of violent activists. And as you know, the mayor of Charlottesville said yesterday or the day before, these people all came to fight. They didn't come to peacefully protest. They wanted to tangle with each other. Now, what's really strange is that the guy who organized the rally, the white supremacist who organized the rally, is a former Obama guy. And he's a former Occupy Wall Street guy. So right away, you know there's something fishy going on here. Second of all, the whole protest was supposedly over a monument to Robert E. Lee. Now, Robert E. Lee was opposed both to slavery and to secession. And so isn't it strange that a man who opposed both slavery and secession has come for the left to symbolize slavery and secession. Remember that there are Democratic racists who have monuments to themselves all over the South. Here's a good example. Robert Byrd, former leader of the Ku Klux Klan. Half of West Virginia is named after Robert Byrd. You drive around Robert Byrd School, Robert Byrd Highway, Robert Byrd this, yet notice that no one is pulling his statues down. He was lionized in the Democratic Party. Hillary called him her mentor. So you know that there's a big lie underway. It's just a matter of getting our fingers on it so we can expose what's really going on.
You mentioned the organizer had ties to Occupy Wall Street and other things associated with the left. The conventional wisdom, of course, coming out of Charlottesville is that these people who came from the white supremacist side, while that might have been part and parcel of the Democratic Party years ago in the Jim Crow era, these clearly weren't people who voted for Hillary. These must have been people who voted for Trump. What do we know for sure?
Well, I don't think we know enough for sure. And it is true that there are some of these ragtag white supremacists who have endorsed Trump. I think the reason for that, by the way, is that this sort of white nationalism, these guys purport to be white nationalists. This white nationalism was actually invented in the Democratic Party, but the Democratic Party has actually moved from embracing white nationalism to embracing every other type of minority nationalism. So the Democrats now, they like black nationalism, black pride, black solidarity. They're telling every ethnic group, blacks, whites, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, be proud of what makes you distinctive. But all these ethnic nationalisms are mobilized against white nationalism. So today, if you're a white nationalist, you don't find a hospitable home in the Democratic Party. In fact, you don't find much of a home in the Republican Party either, because Trump is not a white nationalist, but Trump is an American nationalist. So I think that's why some of these white nationalists are for Trump. They normally would be Democrats if the Democrats hadn't created a type of multiculturalism in which these guys are not welcome at the multicultural picnic.
Well, even if they're not really welcome in either side, which they shouldn't be, obviously, but they did gravitate towards Trump in the last election. Does that put more responsibility on him, as the media certainly did over the last few days, for him to get more specific and stronger in his statement?
No, the media is up to something very, very vile and very cunning. And that is, they're trying to excuse the much more dangerous fascism on their own side. Think about it. The driving of speakers off campus, not just the Antifa violent guys, but the deans and the studio bosses in Hollywood, where if you have a different point of view, they'll run you out of town. They'll make sure you never work again. This is the fascism not just of the street, but of the institutions. So the Democratic Party today has much more of a fascist ideology and fascist tactics than anything you see in the Republican Party. Look, I've been speaking at GOP, Lincoln dinners, Reagan dinners, Republican events for 25 years. I've never seen at any of these events a Klansman, a neo-Nazi, a skinhead, any of that. So there's a vicious effort underway to smear the Republicans, who are the party of fighting racism, blocking the Klan, emancipating the slaves. There's an effort to transfer responsibility from the actual guilty party, the Democrats, onto the non-guilty party, the Republicans.
What do you make of the immediate politicization here? And I guess you just talked about it a little bit. That's become pretty expected now in the wake of racial incidents, whether it's Ferguson or what have you. So what's the right way to respond to this so we don't end up going down this knee-jerk partisanship every time something like this happens?
Well, part of it is, what's underway here is an effort to create a national shaming of the right. So, for example, look at the stuff about Trump is a fascist. Now, wait a minute. Trump has never said one kind thing about fascism. If we just roll back the clock when you had real fascism, very dangerous fascism, I'm talking about Mussolini's Italy and Nazi Germany, we have FDR praising Mussolini, sending members of his brain trust to fascist Italy to study Italian fascism, which he thought was more progressive than the New Deal, when he wanted to bring fascist ideas over here. Young JFK went to Nazi Germany, comes back with effusive with praise of Hitler. So here's my point. The Democrats are actually praising the fascist dictators, and the Democrats are now calling Trump, who has none of this history, a fascist.
We're talking with Dinesh D'Souza. The book is The Big Lie, Exposing the Nazi Roots of the American Left. And Dinesh, a couple quick questions in our remaining time with you. One of the things we're seeing jumping off from what happened in Charlottesville, of course, is renewed calls for the removal of Confederate monuments and statues. You've got mayors in Baltimore and Lexington, Kentucky, other places calling for that to happen. The state capitol in Tennessee apparently has a bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest. We saw a group of people tear down an anonymous Confederate statue, just a kind of a generic soldier in Durham, North Carolina yesterday. And so now the debate is raging, even on the right, about whether it's time to remove Confederate monuments and move them to a museum. You've even got folks over at National Review saying it's time to limit them to those specific areas. Others say if you let them go that far, the next thing you know, they're going to be washing Thomas Jefferson and George Washington off the pages of the history book because they owned slaves at one time as well. So what do you see happening here, and what's your position on it?
My position on it is the following. The real slavery debate was not between the North and the South. It was between the pro-slavery Democratic Party and the anti-slavery Republican Party. Most Southerners did not own slaves. Most Confederate soldiers did not own slaves. The Northern Democrats, led by Stephen Douglas, were actively and cunningly protecting slavery and did so for 40 years. So here's the point. This is not a North-South issue. We should be pulling down statues in the North. There were all kinds of Northern Democrats who were voting to keep slavery going and, in fact, wanted to expand it. The blaming of the South is a very cunning, progressive tactic to shift blame from the actual political party. Notice the Democrats are getting no heat for their historical record. They have never admitted it. They've never apologized for it. They've never paid one penny in restitution for it. Southern guilt is the price that they're extracting for their sins.
Their argument, of course, is that they switched. And I think we talked about this last week, that they switched. And Lyndon Johnson, of course, championed the Civil Rights Act. They're the ones that passed and had the majority in Congress for the Voting Rights Act and so forth. And so their argument is that basically they've certainly done a 180. And they would argue, of course, that the Republicans are the ones now with voter ID laws and elsewhere that are actually looking to restrict rights. How do you rebut that?
Well, let's remember, number one, more Republicans proportionately voted for the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, and the Fair Housing Bill of 68. Look, don't take my word for it. You can Google this and look it up in 5 minutes and see if I'm right. So the point is, the opposition to the civil rights movement of the 60s came exclusively from the Democratic Party, the so-called Dixiecrats. Now, for those who say the Dixiecrats switched and became Republicans, again, look it up and count on your fingers how many Dixiecrats became Republicans. I will give you a hint of the answer. It's exactly one, Strom Thurmond. All the other Dixiecrats remained in the Democratic Party. They died as Democrats. So the whole notion that the Dixiecrats became Republicans, that's another part of the big lie.
Last question real quickly. In addition to the battle over monuments, how do you expect the narrative to move on going forward from here in the wake of Charlottesville?
The left wants to have a one-way hate campaign that is against the right in the false idea that we are the fascists. It's simply not true. I'd like to see everybody held accountable to the law. So yes, the white supremacist who plowed into that lady and killed her, let's hold him responsible. You know, the 200 guys who were arrested for rioting, felony rioting during Trump's inauguration, by the way, 11 of them were journalists. That's a crime that carries between 5 and 10 years in prison. So instead of putting these leftists in jail overnight and letting them be martyrs in the morning, let's enforce the laws there too. Once we consistently uphold the law, I think we'll begin to see a normalization of civility in American politics.
We'll be watching. Certainly an intense time in American politics. Dinesh, as always, thanks very much for your time today.
My pleasure.
Dinesh D'Souza, best-selling author and documentary filmmaker. Again, his brand new book, The Big Lie, Exposing the Nazi...
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop it there. And if you want to see the rest of the video, you can go to the web link down there below. Okay. Now, my highlight points in the video. Now, these are some of the points that I'm going to discuss with you that I've seen that needs to be addressed. Now, let me let you know this right now. There are things that I do agree with him on. I really do. But there's a lot of this stuff that I do disagree on. But let me tell you something, that D'Souza, he's really looking at let me put it this way. Let me back up and put it this way. What he's doing, he is looking in the lens of a conservative Christian. That's the view that he's looking in. He's looking into a conservative Christian. All right. Now, if he would actually take the time and ask black people who grew up in black neighborhoods and ghettos, what do they think and what do their grandmothers and their ancestors think about these things? And I'm going to tell you this in a moment. Now, let me first discuss my first response. Now, between 50 seconds and a minute and 5 seconds, D'Souza mentioned that both sides came to fight and reject peaceful protests. You know what? I do agree with him on it. I agree with him 100% on that one. But one of the things that he did not mention is that according to news articles, that the mayor did not want the law enforcement there in Charlottesville to interfere with that, because both sides was there to fight and they wasn't there to do a peaceful protest. And let me show you a couple examples of peaceful protests. Now, this is a peaceful protest that I've been to. Now, you notice that you have the people having their signs and you got this one guy with his Confederate flag. Now, this happened in Orlando, Florida. Now, on this side, I was on this side because I was around people who were anti-Muslim and they was about American values, whereas at the other side of the road was about pro-Muslim, and I don't know what other things that they agreed on. But I know in the end of this particular protest, you had people who were gay, lesbian. They came over with their flags and they came and joined us on our side. And so I think that the police officers, they wasn't quite sure what side that I'm supposed to go on, so they directed me on this side. So I felt more comfortable with the anti-Muslim slash pro-American, that side of the place. And here's another peaceful protest. And by the way, the person who's holding the Jewish flag, that's me. And this is what I call it.
Sing that.
All my soul will worship your holy name.
Now, if you want to see the full video, here's the YouTube web link. Only thing you have to do, write it down, and you can take a look at how a real peaceful demonstration is supposed to be like. Not like the one in Charlottesville. Okay, the one in Charlottesville was not a peaceful protest. The ones that I've just showed you, this is a peaceful protest. And again, if you would like to see that peaceful demonstration or how a real peaceful demonstration is supposed to be like, then you can go basically to that web link below. Another thing, between a minute and 24 seconds to a minute and 31 seconds in the video, D'Souza said Robert E. Lee was opposed to slavery and secession. Now, let me explain to you about this, right? Matter of fact, let's look at the definition of oppose. Now, the definition of oppose is to place over against something so as to provide resistance, counterbalance, or contrast. The second definition, to place opposite or against something, oppose the enemy, oppose a congregational bill, or the third definition, to offer resistance to. Now, if Robert E. Lee was opposed to slavery, then why he had slaves in the beginning? All right. Now, let me read you all something a little bit from the Slavery at Arlington. Now, I provided the resources at the beginning of this video and at the end of this video, and I'm going to read something very quickly. Some slaves had very close relationship with Lee and Custis members, though these relationships were very much governed by racial hierarchy which existed between the slave and slaveholder. Mr. Custis relied heavily on his carriage driver, Daniel Dodson, and Miss Lee had a very personal relationship with the head housekeeper. As married, authorized in Creek. Hold on, let me see, make sure I'm kind of reading on the right one. Let's see, make sure that I'm reading the right one. Yes. Now, as Mary authorized increasingly restricted her activity through the years, she depended on Selena for assistance with basic tasks. A reflection of her relationship, Miss Lee entrusted Selena with the keys to the plantation at the time of Lee's evacuation from Arlington in May 1861. There is evidence that some slaves at Arlington had opportunity which were not widely afforded to slaves elsewhere. Miss Custis, a devout Episcopalian, excuse me for butchering up the words, tutored slaves in basic reading and writing so that each could read the Bible. Miss Lee and her daughters continued this practice even though Virginia law prohibited the education of slaves by the 1840s. Miss Custis also persuaded her husband to free several women and children. Now, Miss Custis, Robert Lee's wife, if she had to persuade her husband to free several women and children, then you think he was opposed to slavery? Now, let me go ahead and read on. So many emancipated slaves settled in the Arlington estate during Mary Carter Syphax, who lived with her husband Charles on 17-acre plot given to her by Custis at the time of her emancipation around 1826. While such allowance may improve the quality of life for the Arlington slave, most black men and women on the estate remained legally in bondage until the Civil War. In his will, George Washington Parke Custis stipulated that the Arlington slave should be freed upon his death if the estate were found to be in good financial standing within 5 years. Otherwise, now listen to this. Listen to this now. George Washington Parke Custis, Robert E. Lee's father-in-law, stipulated that all Arlington slaves should be freed upon his death if the estate were found to be in good financial standing or within 5 years otherwise. Now, if Robert E. Lee was so much opposed to slavery, then we understand that Robert E. Lee inherited slaves. Okay, we understand it. But if Robert E. Lee was opposed to slavery, then why did it take the word of his father-in-law, to tell him to release slaves after his death? And if the estate is found to be in a good financial standings, okay, if Robert E. Lee was so much opposed to slavery, if he was so much opposed to slavery, then you know what? After his death, he would just release the slaves right away. Okay, and listen to this. When Custis died in 1857, Robert E. Lee, the executor of estate, determined that the slave labor was necessary to improve Arlington's financial status. The Arlington slave found Lee to be more strengthened taskmaster than his predecessor. 11 slaves were hired out while others were sent to, excuse me for butchering words, Pamunkey River Estates. In accordance to Custis' instruction, Lee officially freed the slaves in December 29, 1862. Now, why did he continue to have slaves if he was opposed to slavery? You see, D'Souza did not mention that Robert E. Lee had slaves. He only mentioned that Robert E. Lee was opposed to slavery and secession. Now, if this was the case, then I don't know why is he trying to protect Robert E. Lee. I don't know why he's trying to protect it. Well, protect this particular history. Now, let me let you know where I get my definition for those who say, okay, well, maybe this is a counterfeit definition. I get my definition from Merriam-Webster. Here's the website. If you want to check it out, go ahead and check it out. All right. Now, my next response to this video, between 1 minute and 50 seconds to 2 minutes and 15 seconds, D'Souza compared Robert E. Lee to Robert Byrd. Now, I think this is a terrible comparison. This is a bad analogy, okay? You comparing a slave owner to a non-slave owner. If you want to compare hate with hate, something that can be related to, you may want to compare Robert Byrd to David Duke. All right. You want to compare Robert Byrd to David Duke. All right. Now, D'Souza, what he failed to mention that Robert Byrd did apologize for having these negative views about different races. He did apologize, but David Duke did not. And let me tell you something, David Duke, I don't think he's going to ever apologize for how he viewed other races, especially blacks. So I think that D'Souza used a poor analogy. Now, between 4 minutes and 50 seconds to 5 minutes and 21 seconds, D'Souza said that he has been speaking at GOP's Reagan dinners, Lincoln dinners, Republican dinner, and etc. And he never seen a Klansman, neo-Nazi, white supremacist. Also, he says Republicans are not the guilty party. If D'Souza was listening to this video right now, you know what I would ask him? Are you crazy or you just plain out stupid? First of all, let me tell you something about KKK, neo-Nazi, white supremacists. When you're around them, they're not going to let you know, hey, I'm KKK, I'm neo-Nazi, I'm white supremacist. Do you want to join me, D'Souza? No. You crazy out your mind. They're not going to sit up there and tell you at these popular dinners like the Reagan dinners or the Lincoln dinner or Republican dinners. They're not gonna tell you that they're a KKK. They're not gonna tell you they're neo-Nazis. All right, they're gonna hide it. They're not gonna mention it. You will never know. You won't even know the signs that they are a part of these hateful groups. So guess what? Your claim has just been refuted. Also, he says that Republicans are not the guilty party. D'Souza, once again, if you're listening to this video and those who are watching this video, I'm going to tell you the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And a view of a black man that was raised in a black neighborhood. And I'm going to tell you what many people in ghettos are going to tell you. All right? Here it is. They blame white people. They blame white people. White people are the ones who brought slaves from Africa here to the United States to work for them. All right? This is what they're going to tell you. All right? I know this seems harsh, and listen, I'm not blaming anybody who is white today in America. I'm not blaming you. All right? So don't take it as I'm blaming you. I'm going to tell you in the views of black people in the neighborhood that I was raised, and I was raised in an all-black neighborhood. Plus, let me tell you what other blacks in ghettos going to tell you. They blame white people. They don't blame political party. They don't care about political party. And then starting in 7 minutes and 32 seconds of the video, he said it was not between the North and South, but between pro-slavery Democratic Party, anti-slavery Republican Party. Again, let me mention this to D'Souza and anybody who believes D'Souza. Black people don't care about political party where I grew up in the ghettos. Majority of blacks gonna say it was white slave owners to blame. Now, before I go on to this, all right. Now, one of the things I've noticed, D'Souza said in the video, he said that if you would do Google search, you can't just rely upon Google search. Now, notice within that video, he did not give you a reference. Okay, he did not give you a reference. Now, if D'Souza really did his research and gave people the resources, then, you know, he would be more credible. But again, you know, he did not provide any reference where he get his resources from. You know, it makes a person who claims he is an historian look bad. Now, between 8 minutes and 18 seconds and 8 minutes and 34 seconds, he shifted blame on Democrats for slavery when it was not a certain political party or any political party who was at fault. Once again, you know, blacks don't look at political parties. They're going to look at, okay, well, there was white slave owners that bought blacks over. All right. Starting at 10 minutes and 5 seconds, he does say that all people should be accountable for their actions. And let me tell you that I do agree with him 100%. All people should be held accountable for their actions. All right. And let me mention something, another thing too. He said that the actual, if you want to look at it at a political way, in history, all right. Now, I do agree with him, and he may not have said it in this way. He did kind of giving us a hint that the Confederate was composed of Democrats. Now, he is correct on that. Now, he is correct. Now, and let me say this. Now, the other name for the Confederation Party was Democrat Liberal Party, and I did my research on it, and I found that this was accurate. Now you notice that the incident in the Charlottesville, you had neo-Nazi, white supremacists, KKK came out, tried to defend the Robert E. Lee statue. Was it that you had the other group who was Black Lives Matters and all the other groups who wanted the statue to be torn down. All right. Now, if these are liberals or these Democrats wanted this statue down, why is it a problem for Republicans to defend this? Okay. Now, you got to remember, the Confederation was also known as the Democrat Liberal Party. All right. Now, if the Democrats or liberals, however you want to call them, if they want to tear down the statue, let them tear it down. Okay. If it's a Republican statue and the Republicans want to defend that, okay, fine. I understand that. You see what I'm saying? But I don't think people like Donald Trump run off at the mouth talking about something. Well, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson owned slaves. What do you want to do? Tear down their statues? Let me tell you something. There are Democrats and liberals that was trying to tear down the statues. Okay, so why are you making these suggestions? And of course, you know, other people are going to want to take his ideas and say, oh, that's not a bad idea. Okay. You know, Divided we shall fall, united we will stand. Okay, and if you notice in this picture, one side, if you want to use an analogy for this, one side could represent conservative, the other side could represent liberal. And when you have this divide right here, people are going to start going into their groups. They're going to start going into these groups, although they consider themselves as this particular party. So you got to be careful how you divide people, because politics do divide people. Here it is, my resources again. Every resources that I've looked at so far. Slavery at Arlington. If you want to know about slavery at Arlington, there's the website. Making Sense of Robert E. Lee. You want to go to this particular website. Robert E. Lee. You want to know more in depth about his battles that he had. You can go to robertelee.org and find out about the battles he have fought, the battles he fought in, and the wars he fought in. The American-Mexican War, Robert Lee supported. He did fight in the American-Mexican War, and you can find it in the Encyclopedia Britannica website here. And I provided these resources for you. Now, let me say this now. If you're going to have a dialogue or debate with me as far as this, please come with your resources. All right? Don't come with me with fake websites and uncredible websites, because I'm just going to disregard them as non-credible. All right. Thank you for watching this video, and God bless you.